Matt Orfalea made a wonderful video about AOC's spat with Jimmy Dore, and it's going viral. You can help. I'm going to link to it below. But before we bring the ruckus, we're going to show you an email from Victor Tiffany. Actually, it's from Movement for a People's Party. In a stunning, recently leaked video, Joe Biden is heard telling civil rights leaders that they should be satisfied with his rhetorical acknowledgement and expect nothing more. Biden screams at them, saying that he will not be using his executive powers to stand up for the black community that worked hard to elect him or any other working class community. This is a huge development because progressives had rested what little hope they had for Biden on the possibility of executive orders. Hopes that Biden just smashed, as he said he would only be undoing Trump orders. Adding insult to injury, Biden nominated dairy industry lobbyist and former Obama Agriculture Secretary Don Vilsack to head the department again. Vilsack is a rerun of pro-corporate policies that continue to drive rural communities away from the Democratic Party, said The Intercept. Biden and Harris are determined to convince you that their cabinet of lobbyists looks like America. The first Latino Secretary of Health and Human Services, the first woman to run the Treasury, the first all-female communications team, the youngest national security advisor in decades. But what difference does it make if your family's poverty, hunger, and homelessness are imposed by a black, Latino, or white person? We already have a Republican Party. What actually is the point of the Democratic Party? This administration is shaping up to be a mashup of the Obama, George W. Bush, and Clinton administrations. The only difference is they've all had more time to deepen their corruption as corporate lobbyists in the private sector. If it sounds like the country is moving backwards, it's because it is, and the People's Party is going to turn that around. Of course, you knew I'd break in there. The People's Party is not going to turn that around if they can't tell us to refrain from voting for such people. And by such people, I mean people like Biden and Kamala Harris. MPP's leadership couldn't even tell us to refrain from voting for them. So even though they've correctly characterized Biden and his cabinet, they haven't correctly characterized themselves. If there ever is going to be a people's party, if there ever is going to be a true movement that's supposed to help people, it's going to be led by leaders who tell us never to vote for corporatists under any circumstances. Until they get that part straight, I'm certainly not going to donate to their cause, and I'm certainly not going to tell other people to do so. So now it's time to bring the ruckus.
We can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all.
That's garbage. You can do it right now. We need 15 Democrats.
Hi, Jimmy.
We need the elected officials that you helped get elected to tell Nancy Pelosi that you will not vote for her as speaker unless Medicare for all is put on the House floor for a vote.
I think it's a really smart idea.
You know, the worst abuse of power, Crystal, is not using the power you have to fight for people.
Will they? Time to let AOC know they have no other option because we're watching and we see through their bullshit excuses.
We have to put public pressure on them.
I want to see who's going to vote against healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. If you're not going to do it now, you are never going to do it, you phony.
All the people who filled up your voicemail, they're going to remember whether you did the right thing here.
Which side are they really on? This is where you force progressive House members to reveal who they answer to. Do they answer to their constituents or do they answer to the party bosses? Listen to AOC's own words.
The Democratic Party does not do more unless it is pushed.
And so this moment is the great unmasking.
Force it to happen.
Ask them, are you fighters or are you careerists? Are you activists for the people or are you posers on Twitter?
Everyone's going to try to tell you that if you're just a little bit nicer, then it'll be fine. No.
The whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable. You got to make them uncomfortable. She's pretending to be part of a movement when she's really running cover for Nancy Pelosi. Did you think anybody voted for you so you could vote Nancy Pelosi without getting them anything? This is Medicare for all. People's actual lives depend on us doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's your chance to actually use your leverage. Will you?
Take risks.
Or will you be a party fucking climber?
Start bringing the ruckus on the Democratic Party. Force it to happen. Do not trust any political party to automatically work in your interest.
I call on everybody in independent media to join this mission.
Force it to happen.
Force the Congress to show which side are they really on. no vote for Nancy Pelosi unless Medicare for all is put on the House floor for a vote.
The Democratic Party does not do more unless it is pushed. So we need to push them.
Man, great.
Thank you, Matt Orfalea, and I will make sure everybody knows how to get to this video and hope that they will share it like crazy. So this is the Dore Ultimatum. I've been hoping that hashtag trends on Twitter, Dore Ultimatum, and there has been a variety of responses to this ultimatum. David Sirota, writing for Jacobin magazine, on one hand seems to be in favor of it, but on the other hand he seems to be thinking there are better things we should be doing with our leverage. One thing I want to say right up front before I read David's article is, empathy notwithstanding, what separates them from us almost always comes down to how much skin is in the game. Yes, I'm accusing David of not having very much skin in the game. You might also accuse me of not having enough skin in the game, based on the color of my skin, based on all kinds of things. But if you knew my story, you would see that I actually do have quite a bit in the game, even though I have less than others who are being disadvantaged by David's sort of controlled opposition. Not only how much skin is in the game, but where that skin is located. Working class people the world over finally are beginning to figure this out. Malcolm X's smiling Fox liberals have merely pretended to care about the plight of the working poor. They only pretend to be one of us. These controlled opposition pseudo-progressive types always attempt to talk us out of doing anything that might actually work. Are you listening, Vosh the sheepdog? Are you listening, Sam Cedar, David Pakman, David Dole? You know who you are. Cenk Uygur knows, and he's the one the rest of them are all following. And then after they try to talk us out of doing something that might actually work, they try, in very reasonable yet paternal tones, to substitute something else for us to do that has little chance of working. We can always tell that we are on the right track when they try to talk us out of our strategies and tactics. The discussions surrounding the Bernie or bust strategy are a perfect example of this phenomenon. When all the supposed leftists come on their shows and try to talk us out of anything that might actually work, like the Dore Ultimatum, we should be suspicious. So as you listen to me reading this article, you have to decide, is David Sirota operating in good faith or in bad faith? Is he trying to talk us out of something that might actually work, or is he encouraging us? Or perhaps he's just talking out of both sides of his mouth. Forcing a House floor vote on Medicare for all isn't a bad idea, but we should prioritize wielding power over engaging in spectacles, and there are several steps progressive lawmakers like AOC can take to substantively shift power toward Medicare for all supporters. I don't know about you, but I'm already deeply suspicious. If you are among the majority of Americans who want the government to guarantee health care to all, the current political moment raises a question. What can you realistically hope for? Watch that word, realistically. What can you realistically hope for considering that the incoming Democratic president opposes the idea? Let me break in here and say, realistic comes down to what you're willing to do as people, as we the people, to oppose Biden and the Democratic Party. If we were all willing to pile into the streets and withhold our labor, then realistic takes on a whole new meaning now, doesn't it? The other thing that should make you suspicious is how reasonable and paternalistic David sounds as he's splaining this to us. Over the weekend, there has been a debate raging on social media in which some progressive critics began demanding that lawmakers like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez use their votes in the upcoming House Speaker election as leverage to get a commitment for a floor vote on Medicare for all legislation. The idea is that because the House is so narrowly divided, a handful of progressive icons in Congress could torpedo Nancy Pelosi's bid to get reelected Speaker unless she agrees to schedule such a vote. A floor vote on existing Medicare for all legislation could absolutely be a useful organizing tool. It could clarify which Democratic lawmakers actually support the idea, which Democrats are merely feigning support by just co-sponsoring the bill but not voting for it, and which Democrats actively oppose it. That would provide a helpful roadmap for future primaries and pressure against its opponents. But dear viewers and listeners, guess what the next word is? However! But if you're withholding your judgment, that's a good idea because perhaps he's saying that we need that performative vote and other things. and not or. So if that's the case, then David's on the right track. However, only asking for that performative vote rather than also asking for things that might change the structural power dynamic would be a waste, and yet another instance of progressives reverting to a feckless tradition of prioritizing spectacles rather than wielding actual power. Okay, so what else is he asking us to do? I don't mind using leverage to get more concessions as long as it doesn't take away the actual floor vote. If he's going to say that other things are more important than getting the actual floor vote, then I'm going to disagree in advance. Back to David. If members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus were serious about championing Medicare for all and about using their momentary power in the speaker race as leverage, they could do much more than merely push for a ceremonial Medicare for all vote that might be helpfully clarifying but also would very likely fail. He's already said that it doesn't matter if it fails, it would still be useful, and that's the truth. They could additionally condition their vote for Pelosi on a commitment that she do the following. Okay, David, I'm still on board as long as you don't ask us to remove the demand for a floor vote. Number 1, remove the Medicare for All opponent who chairs the key committee. The current chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, which is one of the key panels overseeing Medicare for All proposals, is Representative Richard Neal, who has played a singularly destructive role on behalf of his healthcare industry and Wall Street donors. He opposes Medicare for All and recently has tried to water down surprise billing legislation in the middle of the pandemic. Pelosi can remove Neal as the panel's chairman, and next in line in seniority is Representative Lloyd Doggett, who is a much more progressive lawmaker. In terms of changing the actual power dynamic, changing the leadership of this committee would do as much or more in one fell swoop than securing a doomed floor vote. Doomed floor vote. I don't know, that makes me suspicious. Doomed floor vote. Who cares if it's a doomed floor vote? We still need it. It's not doomed because it shows us who's actually in support of Medicare for All. I don't know about you, but I'm still suspicious. Number 2, schedule a vote on existing legislation to let states create single-payer healthcare systems. Representative Ro Khanna has authored legislation empowering the Health and Human Services (HHS) Secretary to approve waivers to states that want to create their own Medicare for All programs. As we previously reported, incoming HHS Secretary Javier Becerra has been an outspoken supporter of Medicare for All and has said he supports efforts to pass such programs in states, including in his home state of California, which recently considered such legislation. Unlike Medicare for All legislation, which is unfortunately probably still doomed to defeat right now, why do you keep saying that, David? Khanna's bill may actually have a shot at immediately passing the House and putting Becerra on the spot to deliver on his past rhetoric. Now, I don't doubt that it's been rhetoric. An additional bonus, his bill could also humiliate Republican opponents who so often claim to support devolving power to states, but whose votes against the proposal will expose their hypocrisy. Now, just because David is being reasonable doesn't mean you should assume he's not controlled opposition. Because frankly, these are good ideas. But they might also be merely a shiny object intended to get us to take our focus away from our initial demand of a House floor vote. Number 3, schedule a vote on a resolution demanding Biden use executive authority to expand Medicare. The American Prospect has reported that, thanks to provisions in the Affordable Care Act, President Joe Biden will have the unilateral executive authority to expand Medicare coverage during the pandemic. The House can pass a resolution demanding that he immediately take this action. A resolution like this should be a no-brainer. Again, as long as it doesn't distract us from what we most need to have happen. What do you think, dear viewers and listeners? Are these merely shiny objects, or are they really intended to help? Will making so many demands dilute the initial proposal? Number 4, include provisions in year-end spending bills that create a presidential commission charged with crafting a Medicare for All program. This one sounds suspiciously like it might be an instead of. Although he is going to pick on President Barack Obama in a good way. President Barack Obama created a commission to cut Social Security. Progressives can flip the script and create a commission charged with evaluating other countries' universal healthcare systems and coming up with proposals to guarantee healthcare to all Americans. Granted, this is what Congress exists to do, but forcing a Democratic administration to come up with proposals could also advance the cause by pushing the executive branch to take the concept seriously. I like this idea because it's all about leverage. I'm just hoping that it wouldn't water down the initial threat to Pelosi. And finally, number 5, author a discharge petition to force a vote on Medicare for all. Now this one sounds suspiciously like a substitute for Jimmy's proposal. I think he saved the most insidious one for last. A discharge petition is designed to let rank-and-file members of the House circumvent normal rules and committee procedures to force a floor vote on an issue. Creating a discharge petition on Medicare for All would help clarify who actually supports the program and who is merely co-sponsoring Medicare for All legislation as a performative but empty gesture. I'll tell you why they're doing the co-sponsoring thing. They know it's popular amongst Americans and they're doing it to try to get reelected. I would say that if they can't leverage Nancy and threaten Nancy and force her to promise to put it on the floor, that this might be something to do after. Here's another clever idea of David's. I have to admit it sounds very reasonable, and it also sounds smart. There's no doubt that David is smart. He's frighteningly smart. Here is his conclusion. These are just 5 actions of many that could be taken in the context of the House Speaker's race, and they can be taken in addition to a demand for a Medicare for All floor vote. They can be taken. Are you saying they should be taken in addition, or are you saying they should be taken instead of? Why don't you come right out and say what you mean, David? Indeed, asking for all of these items means the final negotiated compromise position could be the Medicare for All floor vote. So throw all of these things up against the wall and see what sticks, in other words. Ah, here's the crux of the matter. He is trying to distract us. But here's the thing to understand. Okay, Dad, what do you want me to understand? Merely asking only for that vote and not taking actions or making demands to substantively change the power equation. No, this would substantively change the power equation. But here's the thing to understand. Merely asking only for that vote and not taking actions or making demands to substantively change the power equation would start such a negotiation in a position of weakness, asking for the bare minimum from the beginning rather than asking for the whole loaf in hopes of at least getting half the loaf. It would also be a huge missed opportunity and typical for a progressive movement that so often values spectacle over power. I know that my feckless union leaders often say things like this. They say things like, don't just go part way, let's go for the whole enchilada. But then they don't actually do anything. In effect, they just distract us. In the back of my mind, I can't help think that he might be trying to make sure that Pelosi is reelected as Speaker. If we're not willing to let a Republican be Speaker, then we really aren't in this the right way. And bottom line, I don't think David is willing to let a Republican be Speaker any more than he was willing to let Trump continue as president. And if that's your initial position, then you're not in a very strong place for bargaining. When you're in a game of chicken, you can't blink first. I think Nancy is way too enamored of her power to ever take a chance on not becoming the Speaker. If even 5 or 6 people stuck together and said they wouldn't vote for her, I think she would blink first. There would be no missed opportunity. We would have the floor vote. It's not a missed opportunity also if the vote fails. It's not a failure because then we can see which assholes are all talk and no action. But if it were to pass, then the same thing could happen in the Senate and we'd see who's actually in favor of it. Or at least we'd see who would actually vote for it so they could keep their jobs. Now here's where he really seems to be patting us on the head as though we've already conceded that he's right. And I don't know about you, but I haven't made that concession. In some sense, that proclivity is understandable. Our short attention span social media culture disproportionately rewards spectacles rather than the unglamorous wielding of power. I don't know, David, that sounded a lot like something Hillary would say. It also sounded like something Barack would say. For instance, it is easier to do YouTube rants and get retweets about a high-profile floor vote than it is to get everyone excited about the much harder organizing work of getting esoteric HHS waivers or removing a relatively obscure committee chairman who is blocking progress. That was absolutely a cheap shot against Jimmy Dore. But don't forget, we can do all of those things. Don't try to distract us. I'm just really suspicious of how he uses the words doomed and spectacle. It's not doomed, and it's not merely a spectacle, because if they do it, they're going to do something good, no matter what happens. It's not a doomed floor vote if it happens at all. It's not even doomed if Nancy doesn't blink and we get a Republican as Speaker of the House. How is any Republican worse than Nancy Pelosi? And that probably is where the rubber meets the road. The comfy people are also extremely tribalistic. Their team is the Democrat team, and they can't even fathom having a Republican as Speaker if we can avoid it. And frankly, that's bullshit. You're never going to win the game for the American people if you insist on being that comfy and tribalistic. And the last paragraph is, of course, the spectacles can be important. They can be critical organizing tools, but the performative gestures, there's another word, performative. But the performative gestures on their own are not enough. Ultimately, passing something like Medicare for All is going to require the actual wielding of power, and progressive lawmakers are in a position to wield some power right now by making an entire series of concrete demands. It's okay with me if they make a series of demands as long as they make it clear that the demand for a floor vote is non-negotiable. As I was editing this video, it dawned on me. The reason he wants to put more than one proposal on the floor is so that when they're negotiating, then they can negotiate some of these other things for a floor vote. So instead of a floor vote, they can try to get something else that's on David's list. Fiendishly clever when we actually need a floor vote, which is why he's trying to distract us from getting a floor vote. The end result is that we'll get something, but it won't actually work in the long run. Therefore, we should reject all of these other waterings down and we should just get our damn floor vote. The other inescapable conclusion is that the reason David Sirota is coming to AOC's defense is because she will be such a spectacular sheepdog when Bernie is out of the picture. The fact that he's speaking this way leads me to the conclusion that Jimmy Dore is on the right track and we all should be backing him up. Empathy notwithstanding, what separates them from us almost always comes down to how much skin is in the game. Also important is where that skin is located. Working class people the world over finally are beginning to figure this out. Malcolm X's smiling fox liberals have merely pretended to care about the plight of the working poor. They only pretend to be one of us. These controlled opposition pseudo-progressive types always attempt to talk us out of doing anything that might actually work. Then they try, in very reasonable yet paternal tones, to substitute something else for us to do that has little chance of working. We can always tell that we're on the right track when they try to talk us out of our strategies and tactics. The discussions surrounding the Bernie or bust strategy are a perfect example of this phenomenon.